Good afternoon. I sound a little loud to myself here. It's good to see your smiling faces. I suspect that you're ready to have lunch. If you will give us just a moment, it is ready for us. Dr. Torrance will give us a meditation. At the end of the meditation, if you're a vegetarian, you will go out of that middle door. If you are not a vegetarian, you will go out of the door to my right, for some of you, and to your left for some of the others of you. If you will receive it, Dr. Torrance as the meditation, and then there is a marvelous meal prepared for you this afternoon. I hope you're hungry.
Good afternoon. And thank you, Dr. Linton. Usually Dr. Linton and I are exchanged in this process, but they wanted me to kind of step up. So, again, good afternoon. I'd like to talk about the wisdom of beauty before we go into blessing of food. And it's pretty simple. As I thought about today and listened to our student teachers, Dr. Benjamin, I just thought information is knowledge, knowledge is wisdom, wisdom is truth, truth is love, love is beauty, and we all know that beauty is God. So let us bow our head. Let us thank God for food when others are hungry, for drink when others are thirsty, for company and friendship when others are lonely. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. I know that you're enjoying your meal, but in the interest of time, we need to begin again. I know we will have your full attention. This afternoon, all of the questions that you've ever wanted to ask about the changes in education and where are we going will be answered. I am delighted to have Joan Leno here, who will introduce the person that will give us this wonderful information.
Good afternoon. That was a great meal, wasn't it? Really appreciate being able to be here with you guys today. I have the honor this afternoon to introduce you to Dr. Ivy Pfeffer from the Department of Ed. Just a little bit about her. You've got some information in your program. But Dr. Pfeffer has given the last 20 years to education in Arkansas. She started out at Pocahontas School District, first as a Spanish and English teacher, and then she went on to be assistant principal, and then the last 10 years as high school principal. In 2013, she came to the Department of Ed at the same time I did, and she was the Director of Educator Evaluation. The following year, she took the role as the Assistant Commissioner for Educator Effectiveness and Licensure. I'm doing this without notes. And she has worked in that role since then, and worked to ensure that all kids in Arkansas have access to excellent educators. And she'll talk a little bit about that today. Most recently, Dr. Pfeffer was announced that she'll be our new Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Ed, and she'll take that role on July 1st. And she's going to talk today about her role and how she's going to help to move us forward in Arkansas to transform our education system. So it's with pleasure I introduce you to Dr. Pfeffer.
Thank you, Joan. It is easy to do good work when you have great people on your team. And I just want to say, for those of you who know Joan, you know why my job is a pleasure, because she and so many others do really, really good work. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to just share some information with you, but I'm also going to ask you to share some information and feedback with me. So during the presentation, I may stop and ask for some input and feedback. I do have one point where you're going to move around a little bit if you would like. So please feel free for this to be informal. And I am not a gifted public speaker, but I do enjoy being able to talk about the work that we do, and I hope that it'll be beneficial for you. All right, so starting off today, I'm going to share a little bit about the vision for the state of Arkansas in terms of education for students. And when Commissioner Key came on board, one of the first things that we started doing was developing a strategic plan and looking at where do we see the future of Arkansas in education 3 years, 5 years, 10 years in the future. And so the vision is to transform Arkansas to lead the nation, to lead the nation in student-focused education. And so the past couple of years, I think some of you have been part of these conversations, but what does that really mean? What does that look like? What is student-focused education? And so I thought about when I was in high school, and I'll tell you that I did high school really well. I grew up in a small community, went to a small high school, made good grades. I was valedictorian of the class. I think there were 3 of us, there were actually 3 valedictorians, but there were like 90 in the class. But anyway, I was involved in clubs and activities. My parents knew my teachers knew me and my sisters, and high school was easy. And when I left high school, I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be an attorney. And I went to Rhodes College in Memphis on a music scholarship. And when I got to college, I didn't do college very, very well. And what I quickly learned, that my high school education really didn't prepare me in the way that I needed to be prepared to step out into a world that was very, very different than anything I had experienced. And I see a lot of you shaking your heads. And so when I think about a student-focused education, I think about a world now where we need our students to really know and understand who they are, really know and understand and have multiple pathways throughout their high school career and into their college, and realize so many of the opportunities and understand why they're choosing the pathways that they're choosing. A student-focused education in Arkansas is going to be one where they're not guided so much by time, by place, and by pace of instruction, but one that, basically because we're in a technology-driven world, provides multiple opportunities, provides a lot of flexibility, but still the responsibility that we provide them with the educators so that they can all learn. So in thinking about that, we are going to have to really work to ensure that we have a high-quality educator workforce in order for our schools and our state to transform and to lead the nation in student-focused education. Because how are we going to have a student-focused education system when most of us grew up in a system that maybe wasn't quite so student-focused? Most of our education was guided by requirements, time, being in a certain place at a certain time for a certain amount of time. So that's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of thought. It's going to take a lot of collaboration. When I think about the educators in my life, I told you I didn't go to college wanting to be a teacher. After my first year of college, I wound up back in near my hometown, back in Jonesboro. I was married. My husband and I lived in a tiny, tiny house trailer, going to school, working part-time, and having a baby to take care of pretty early on. And I remember having a visit one afternoon from one of my high school teachers. And she happened to drop by because she just wanted to catch up with me. And she came by and she visited. And at this time, I still didn't know where I was going with my career. I just knew, well, you know, I'm going to take some classes and we're going to see where this goes. And so as we were talking, she talked a lot about, you know, when we were in high school, and she was my high school Spanish teacher. She was one of those teachers that always had something going on for us. I went to a lot of Saturday Spanish competitions, not because I really wanted to, but because I knew she was going to pick up the phone and call my parents if I didn't volunteer to go. And so I just really didn't have a choice. But that day she came and visited. She just told me, she said, well, I hope that you'll consider a career in education. I hope you'll consider becoming a teacher because you would be a great teacher. And I thought about it, and not long after, I decided that that would be my career path, and I've not regretted it for one day. It's provided me with so many opportunities, and I'm very blessed to be here today working with you. But I think it's because of her influence and knowing the power of when someone believes in you and when someone encourages you, knowing what a difference that makes and knowing what a difference that all of you have already made to students all across Arkansas. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the educator workforce. Now I'm going to share some information with you that's not quite so positive, but I'm also going to share a lot of things to you that I think are pretty exciting and pretty promising. So when we think about educators, we oftentimes tend to just think about a shortage. And if we just do that, we're being short-sighted. What we've got to do is we've got to think about our educator workforce as a broader strategy. And we not only need to think about attracting people to the workforce, preparing them with a high-quality education and experience. Once they're there, we've got to develop, we've got to support if we're going to retain our most talented educators. And those of you here who work in educator preparation, your job, your influence doesn't just end with the time that you have those teachers here preparing. Because a lot of the things you do here, a lot of the relationships that you develop and foster here will have a huge impact as those educators transition into the workforce, and will have a huge impact on the long-term retention. So our challenge is really treating all these components as a coherent system with consistent expectations for teachers and principals. Okay? So when you think about that, think about a coherent system. One of the many challenges we know are oftentimes the silos. So this is where I want your input. Think about right now, can any of you, within your everyday work, can any of you right now identify where maybe there's a silo? Maybe where you're kind of working alone? Anybody think about that? Okay. I'm going to raise my hand and say that first red circle there could definitely be the Department of Education. I was at a meeting yesterday and the day before with the National Governors Association, and I was there with a member from the Governor's Office and a member from the Department of Higher Education. And I was talking about all these things that we're doing. And what are they doing? They're looking at me and saying, we didn't know this. We didn't know this. I wish we knew this. So right there, I can tell you, silo. Okay? Anybody else? Are there any silos here at UAPB? Yes? Just a few? Okay? Are there any silos outside within the schools where you work? Okay? Do you sometimes feel like, oh, we've got everything going well over here, but not so much over here? Okay. Our silos, that's going to be a major challenge if we're going to build these systems. So let me just share real quick with you a little bit about Arkansas's challenges. A lot of this is data that you have seen before. We'll be issuing our updated educator preparation provider report probably within the next month. We're going to keep working on that, keep enhancing that. And I'll leave this slide on this computer, leave this presentation on this computer so you all can have access to these. But we know that enrollment in our educator preparation programs is a major challenge and has continued to be so. We can see, just even going back to 2013, there's been a steady decline in educator preparation enrollment. Not only just in overall enrollment, there's been a decline in both traditional and non-traditional preparation program enrollment. When you look at the trend in public and independent educator preparation programs, there's been a decline in both of those as well. So again, I think part of the attention that has been really generated towards teacher shortages has been generated by this kind of information here. But if this is all we focus on, If this is all we focus on, we're being short-sighted because the workforce is an even bigger system, okay? So enrollment and preparation programs, that is a big thing. And we know that, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about some things we're doing, though, to address it. Okay, this chart here, we're trying to look at information in a lot of different ways because it's not just about the enrollment, but it's about, does the enrollment meet the demand that we have? Does the enrollment meet the need that we have? So if you look at these different numbers here, the blue show the number of completers in educator preparation programs over the last 5 years. Okay, so if you look at the blue, those are completers. If you look at the orange, that's the number of beginning teachers each year. So in the same year, you have that number of completers. Those are showing the number of first-year teachers, okay? Now, I will add a disclaimer here. This is all data that is reported either by the EPPs, the Educator Preparation Programs, or the school districts. So if it's not 100% accurate, it could be some of the human reporting. However, we try to look at it and see, are there data anomalies? So we try to look and see where, you know, are we concerned about the consistency and in the data quality. But if you look, what do you notice each year for the last 5 years in terms of the blue and orange? Which number is bigger? The orange. The number of first-year teachers is exceeding the number of completers each year. Okay? Now again, this is just a big picture look here. It's not breaking it down by geographic area, it's not breaking it down by content area, but just at a big picture glance, you see that there's a gap between the number of candidates coming from programs and the number of first-year teachers. Now where is the gap? Some of it may be from reciprocity, people coming in. Some of it may be for people who complete a program and don't immediately go to work. But again, as you start to look at all this and look at how those converge, and then looking at the number of candidates who are enrolled, because if you think about the time a candidate enrolls and then the time they complete, maybe a couple of years in between, you can start projecting out what we're looking at. And so as we start projecting out, we're getting more and more concerned that soon our enrollees are going to be less than the number of teachers that we have to have every year to keep the pipeline going. Okay, so this picture here is a chart. Again, I'll leave these slides and we can make sure that you all have access to these. This chart here lists all of our preparation programs and shows the number of completers each year and then the number who are employed in an Arkansas public school the following year. So if we look at this school year, 2016-17, 62% of last year's completers were employed this year, okay? So 62% of those who completed a preparation program somewhere in the state of Arkansas are actually working in an Arkansas public school this year. Okay, so you're going to ask, well, where are the others? And in your preparation provider report, you're going to get a little bit of a better sense because we're going to break that information down by content area. So as we've looked back at the past few years, and it may not be the case in every institution, but you'll be able to break it down statewide and also in your area, what we find are there are some trends, okay? When you look at the completers in early childhood or elementary programs, there are a greater percentage of them not employed than in some of our secondary areas. PE, we sometimes see a pretty large percentage of those who complete a program in physical education not employed. They may become employed a year or two after, as we see that new number exceeding the completer number. But when you think about candidates who complete a program and then wait a year or 2 years or 3 years, what starts to happen? The longer the gap from the preparation to the employment, what tends to happen? Okay, you see your knowledge starts falling off, or you start, if you're not really keeping up with professional development, you tend to forget a little bit of it. You tend to get disconnected from the experience. Another piece of data that we're looking closely at, and I don't think that probably, I'm not sure if that came out clear or not on the slide, but this is just, again, a statewide look, and this is going to be broken down for each institution. You can see that we have a discrepancy in the demographics of Arkansas students and in Arkansas teachers and in those enrolled in preparation programs. As a state, we are becoming a more diverse population, but we still have a largely white educator workforce. And so in terms of attracting and preparing diverse candidates, as a state, we have to do a better job. We have to do a better job so that we are preparing candidates who are going to be successful in the roles and who are going to be able to meet the needs of students. We know from research that oftentimes people tend to get their post-secondary education and go to work within 60 miles of where they grow up. Therefore, it's important that we are recruiting, we are preparing, and we are encouraging people to become educators and to work in our schools and to meet the needs in our area. This is the last data slide I'm going to show you. As I said, if we only focus on the number of teachers coming into the workforce, we're being short-sighted, we're missing out, because we've also got to look at the retention piece. And if we see that we have issues in retaining teachers, we've got to figure out why. What is it that we can do to encourage teachers to stay? One of the things we can do is help teachers find the right pathway from the get-go, getting them prepared in the right field. We have a large number of teachers who begin their first year working on an ALP. Now, we allow that to happen. We have a policy that allows that to happen, an additional licensure plan. But how effective can a new teacher be? Talked to a beautiful young lady a little while ago who has just gotten her P4 license. But if her first year, if she got hired in a school, but they said, well, we'll hire you, but you have to teach 8th grade math. So you have to work on an ALP. Now, during that first year, she really, maybe not having to do anything, and she just told me flat out, she said, I am not going to go for middle school math. I want to teach middle school English, do not want to teach middle school math. But let's just say that's the only way she could get a job. How good of a job is she, how successful is she really going to feel if she's trying to learn how to teach 8th grade math? And there's a policy that would allow her to do that, but how successful can she really be? Okay, it's going to be tough, isn't it? But imagine if that is about 25 to 30% of our first-year teachers. So if we're not getting them prepared in the right areas, content areas to meet the needs of our schools, and if they're taking jobs just to be able to get a job and then somewhere wiggle in and maybe find the right place, it's going to be very difficult, isn't it? And I think that may just be one of many factors that are contributing to long-term teacher retention rates. And so as we look, after about 5 years, we lose a little over 30% of our teachers. So when you put all that data together, declining enrollment in the first place, losing 30-something% after 5 years, oh, and also then realizing that about 40% don't make it from preparation to the classroom the following year, we realize that we have a major issue with our educator workforce. And therefore, if we don't build these systems to address it, get out of our silos so that we're all working together and understanding the good things that are going on, I'm very concerned about where we're going to be in 3 years, 5 years. And I'm very concerned that we're never going to realize that goal of transforming Arkansas to have a student-focused education system. So, let's look here at Mr. Williams. Case of Mr. Williams. You've got 3 pictures here of Mr. Williams. So just based a little bit upon the work you do and the information I shared, talk at your table just for a second. Talk about what do you think that this picture represents. Okay? I'm going to give you about a minute to talk. Okay, I'm going to stop your conversations for a minute. How many of you looked at this picture and thought about the Mr. Williams being a first-year teacher? That very first picture there on the left. How many of you looked at it and thought about that? Anybody? You knew it was new, okay? So then what happens? You've got this new person here standing there, got a book, really looks intent. So what happens then?
Or an old teacher, or an older teacher.
Or an older teacher, okay, definitely. And we have a lot of non-traditional folks who come as a second career, yes, okay? So then what's happening in the middle there? Okay? Okay, getting in there, doing some teaching, and then what happens in the third picture? Okay, it all just blows up in his face, all right? And there are some of that could represent, you've got someone beginning, they get a little more expert, maybe a little more comfortable, but then by the time all these things keep going, everything just seems to blow up and it's all over. Did anybody look at this a little differently? Yes, ma'am.
We classify him as a middle level teacher because middle level education majors have to be certified in 2 areas. So we said that he chose to be certified in chemistry and in math because he's teaching math in one picture and looks like science in the other. So we also said first year teacher, he's young, which is why he has to refer to his book for a lot of things.
Okay. So you looked at that as more of a positive thing that, you know, you've got this educator here. So that's what we want, right? We want that teacher who is well prepared and who's learning and growing and developing. Unfortunately, sometimes it is the other way around. You get up there, you get going, and then all of a sudden things just seem to blow up and derail you. Okay? Yes, sir.
Okay, I look at it that it's middle school teachers. One subject he's very strong in, but not say very strong. He knows the subject matter, which is probably the math, and he's weaker in the science. So he's making a mess out of science.
Okay. There you go. And we have that too. And as you're preparing candidates, that's part of the learning experience, isn't it? Having the time so that they can learn that, yes, sometimes the way you instruct, there was a group yesterday who talked about it. They felt like that last picture represented the hands-on work and getting the teacher all excited and on fire. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this and a lot of thoughts. We'll have one more, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I actually look at it as 3 different ways that you can learn. You can learn from listening, and then I thought the other one was read and write, and then the other one was actually hands-on.
Very good. And so how important is it in terms of once we have teachers well prepared, how important is it that they're given those opportunities for the continuous growth and development? Critical. And where do those opportunities come from? Mentorships, professional development, and having building level leaders who are going to support and provide those ongoing opportunities. Okay? So, if we are going to have this workforce that is going to expand the entire gamut from attracting to the profession all the way through the support and development for retention so that we can keep those really talented teachers, we are going to have those conversations. We're going to have to be outside of our silos and continuously looking at different ways to approach it. Okay? So if we talk about teacher shortages in only a recruitment approach, we're not going to be meeting that systems thinking aspect. And so when we think about systems and how do we improve, we want to keep on ensuring that teachers are given that opportunity for high quality clinical practice. Now, the reality is we have a lot of cases because of shortages in those who are coming to the workforce. We have a lot of teachers who are hired without preparation, and we know that. But we also have opportunities in those cases where people are hired without having had that preparation and that experience. We have opportunities to pull them into a preparation program and to give them high quality experiences as they're learning. Is it going to be more difficult? Many times it is. But we do have those opportunities and we don't need to ignore those. Enhanced induction and mentoring. This fall, the educational service cooperatives are going to be taking a lead role in the mentoring and induction for new teachers. And we're going to build in a system so that that mentoring can take place over 3 years, where it's not just a one-time, one-on-one approach, but where it is a professional learning community of new teachers, and where the co-ops can assist schools to be able to meet unique needs for novice teachers. They're going to need you as partners in that. Strengthening professional learning opportunities. We are looking at ways to provide personalized competency-based professional development through micro-credentials and getting away from the requirement that 6 hours means high-quality PD, as long as you go sit through the right 6 hours and you meet the requirement. We're going to provide the opportunity for schools to have some flexibility, to be able to look at the type of meaningful professional development to meet personalized needs of educators and not worry if it takes 6 hours or 600 hours, whatever the support is needed so that that teacher can demonstrate competency in that area. We want to boost teacher leadership. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but provide really meaningful ways for teacher leadership to be recognized and those teacher leaders to be utilized in schools. And also look at our principal pipeline and how we're preparing our school and district leaders to see what changes we need to make so that we have the kind of leaders that can truly build the culture in schools to help us transform to a student-focused education. So this is where I'm going to ask you to get up and move around if you want. I'm not going to make you get up if you don't want to. But in that question there, if you could wave a magic wand and restructure the teaching profession, making it more attractive, sustainable, and effective, what would you do? Okay, and I've got 4 ideas here, and then I have an other. Okay, and so I hope you can read those. I hope the print's big enough, but I'll read them out to you. And what I'm going to ask you to do is vote with your feet. Okay, so if you think my first idea is the best idea here, then you're going to go stand in one part of the room, the second one, the third and fourth. And if you've got another thought, then you're just going to come to the middle. Okay? And when you get there, I'll ask you to go stand there and just take a couple of minutes while you're there talking about why this is the magic that might help us transform the teaching profession. Why this would be the thing if you could only choose one thing. Why would this be the one thing you would do? And what are those challenges and opportunities? Okay, so the first one is restructure preparation to create teacher residency programs, okay, in collaboration with school districts. So truly create a teacher residency program that's more in-depth than a traditional student teaching approach. So that would be one, and don't get up until we read all 4, but if that's one you vote for, and come over here to this corner in the front of the room. Your second option is rethink professional learning by providing opportunities for competency-based, personalized professional development. So if that's your choice, go to the back corner over there. The third one is foster a pipeline of teacher leaders with intentional roles, intentional leadership roles. So go back over to this corner if that's your option. And then number 4, Focus on building a diverse educator workforce and embed competencies for culturally responsive teaching into programs. If that's your choice, come over here. And if you just have something else wonderful, you can just stay out here in the middle, okay? So vote with your feet, and we'll come around with microphones and have you share out. Okay, so we're going to start back here with the professional development group. And I'm going to let them just briefly tell you why they chose to be back here.
Okay, on the rethink professional development and tooling and having professional development. And that's all the professionals. Well, to rethink the professional development is retooling it that it is relevant to the teachers who are attending, because I always felt in physical education when I attended public school professional development that nothing content area was for us. And the tools and the enhancement that they had was always for the content area of the cores, except, you know, in our area. But we were always asked to go in and do English or remediation classes, and a lot of us are not prepared. So I want them to rethink that and retool it. Yeah.
Great job. Okay, do we have a microphone over there? Who wants to talk about why residencies would be a great thing to restructure?
Hello everyone. While professional development is important, and also teacher leaders and building a diverse workforce, it all starts with the prep program. It all starts from the very beginning. Before you even enter the field of education, how are you being prepared? Most student teaching internships are only half a semester, or maybe if they are a whole semester, you're not there the full time the first semester. You don't actually learn what a full school year looks like. You don't actually have the opportunity to spend a year creating lesson plans, dealing with testing schedules, dealing with school schedules, school programs, to actually know what a full school year looks like. And half a semester, roughly 7.5 weeks, is not nearly enough time to properly prepare a teacher for it. You spend your first 2 to 3 weeks observing your teacher, and then eventually you end up trying to mimic that teacher. And finally, about the last week, you find your own way to teach. But by then, you go the whole summer, and you're entering with the first of the school year, and you're just like, I don't really know what to do. I had to make all these lesson plans for a whole year. I didn't even make 3 weeks worth. So a residency program would definitely help incoming teachers because it will properly prepare them. Also, the word residency program sounds to me as though it won't just be an unpaid internship, because honestly, we're at the school as student teachers 5 days a week. We have to schedule our doctor's appointments whenever we can, go to Med Express if something goes wrong. We can't come on campus. We literally are teachers, except we're not getting paid. A residency program would change that. Memphis actually has a program where they at least provide their teachers with housing. They stay in an apartment complex together, all their teachers stay together, and you earn your master's. Most programs, other than education programs, have a 5-year program where you stay another year and you're able to earn your master's. The education field does not have that, and I believe that's important if you're going to properly prepare teachers for the future. So a residency program with benefits, not just a person having to go to the school and not do anything. So yeah, I'm going to pass the mic, but we need proper preparation. I'm currently looking for residency programs, and Arkansas doesn't have any, so
I think we have a planning committee already started. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Well, we looked at the teacher leadership and with intentional roles, and we had 2 points that we wanted to make about that. One is that having that mentor in place is critically important to helping students get through that first year once they're out, and to make them feel connected to the school and be able to move forward and to answer some of those questions. Having someone there to guide you and promote you and move you through the process is very helpful. And then the other side of that too is that your better teachers generally want to have a broader impact. And if they find themselves just in a classroom and not able to reach beyond that classroom, not to have that broader impact, they become dissatisfied and they find other places to go, they move on. So you lose some of your best, most experienced teachers because they don't feel like they can grow.
Thank you.
We somewhat divided that square up into two parts. We started looking at the fact that when we look at our population of teachers who are now teaching in our schools, that some textbooks say 80%, some say 90% of the teacher population are the white population, Anglo-American population. Attending a SHIELD conference a couple of months ago, we learned that 2 to 3% of the population of teachers were African American males. And we're looking at how can we diverse our population of even getting more males into our classrooms. So when we focus on building a diverse educator workforce, that's the piece that's where we need to begin. How are we going to do that? We talk about teaching, integrating diversity into our classrooms. And so as we kind of sort of talked among ourselves, we said that diversity is the key. But how are we going to reach out to the population of children, students? How are we going to diverse our population starting at this level to get diversity into our classrooms? And so the higher we go, we lose the diversity of people, diversity of teachers. Okay, so then we looked at the other part, which is really talking about the content. How do we embed the content dealing with diversity in our classroom? Because we have a diverse group of students in our schools. It's no longer black and white. We have Asian, Hispanic, Native Americans. So we're now looking at, we need to make sure that we're addressing the population of students surrounded in our particular area. So we just looked at that piece, first of all, looking at the population. Let's work on getting the population diverse within our classroom, and once we get them, let's keep them there. Anybody else want to say something?
Thank you. And I appreciate you breaking that apart because I do think it adds meaning when you look at it in those terms. So if I could get one person from the other group, whoever had the best other idea, or who's going to be the spokesperson. Two split up. Okay, so let's hear from the two. Let's hear two more ideas, and then we'll go ahead and move on.
Okay. Good afternoon. Our group said the first thing we would do in the other section is throw out Praxis Core. That's what we would do. Okay, well good then. Okay, because we have seen so many talented students coming through the School of Education who could not get past that math section. And you know, if you know anything about Praxis Core, you know they go into trigonometry, high-level algebra. These are P4 people, K6 people. And they're never going to see that as they go out to teach, and we're losing those people. So we believe that your program of study is the most reliable indicator of what you will be able to do when you go out into the field, and your student teaching, of course. So we would throw that out. We keep in the professional part, and we keep in the content area, but we just eliminate Praxis 1 core. And we think we'll get more teachers out of that if we were to do that. Okay, part 2 of other.
I am not in education, and I did not see Practice Core in the list up there, so perhaps I'm off base. But we believe that there is value in all of them. So our response is all of them above. We can't segment out and take care of part A and leave part B to plunder and do whatever. So that's our response, all of the above.
And And I appreciate so much of what all of you said, because all of those ideas there are things that we can do. And there are things that, and it was mentioned as we were walking back needing money. All of these are things that can be done, but they can't be done just by the Department of Education. Because if we do it, and we may do a really good job of it, but if it's just our work, it is not going to have the impact that you all and others within our entire education system, whether that be educator preparation, Department of Higher Education, our legislators, our career education, our Department of Workforce Education. All of these systems together are going to have to work. And as we focus on some of these things that we can do to make changes and to create a sustainable workforce that is well prepared and that is focused on how we create a student-focused education system. I really like this slide here because I think this kind of summarizes how we get the right people and how we keep the right people. Because what we want are talented individuals and individuals with many different talents. But if we're going to get people invested in education, they're going to have to see the personal relevance. For me, that personal relevance began with someone saying, "You would be awesome at this," and making that, reconnecting, helping me to remember all of the things that I did enjoy about my education experience, but also knowing how much more students needed so that they could be successful. Helping to define a career for me. But the other side is that professional credibility. If we're going to retain those talented individuals, they have to have a career they can be proud of. We need to have educators as professionals and to be proud of their career. And that's going, I think, to make the profession more attractive and make people more effective. And so I'm going to stop here with this final slide. This is a graphic that you're going to see quite a bit over the next year. Educators Rising Arkansas. I love that, Educators Rising. Educators Rising, and if you want to Google it, you'll be able to find it. But Educators Rising is an organization supported by the National Teachers Association, several different groups. It's basically just a network around the country of educational resources encouraging young high school students to get interested in a career in education. It is basically what many of our schools are already doing through the Teacher Cadet Program or through the Orientation to Teaching, Teaching and Learning Career Pathways through Career Ed. But Educators Rising is really bringing about a lot of really good resources. It'll provide access to national board videos for students to be able to see what effective teaching looks like. There are opportunities for students to have scholarships. There are resources, competitions. And so Arkansas is going to become part of the Educators Rising affiliate. And we're encouraging all of our educator preparation programs to also sign on as Educators Rising campuses. And we're going to be talking a whole lot more about that beginning in May when we roll this out at the state board meeting. So y'all are the first group to hear about it. So really there's not anything you need to know except when you hear Educators Rising, start paying attention to all of the opportunities. When I was in high school, this would have been kind of like the Future Teachers for America Club, but it's kind of like that times 1,000 for our students now. So we really wanted that to be the umbrella over all of our recruitment efforts and that initial pulling people in. And then as we talked about today, looking at how do we get all those pieces there so that we can have long-term sustainability. So I'm going to end that, hopefully, on a positive note, because I'm excited about the future of education in Arkansas. I'm excited about the vision, but I believe that vision to have a student-focused education is only possible if we invest in our educators and invest in the systems to have a sustainable workforce. So I believe you all are a major player in making that happen, and I'm just excited to get to continue to work with everybody. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeffer. We're really happy to have had you this afternoon. 2 questions have been given to me too, and I'll ask if there are any questions from the audience after these, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Considering the rapid growing of charter schools in the state, what implications will that have, you think, on enrollment and funding of public schools in both, not only in the state of Arkansas, but in the Delta and especially in Pine Bluff?
And I think the answer will be, it depends, and that's not the best answer. So it's going to depend on the growth of charters in this area, obviously. Charters, when open enrollment charters are public schools, so they do receive public funding. What we are seeing with a lot of our charter schools that is encouraging in some ways, we're seeing more and more charters wanting their teachers to become licensed because they see the value in them having that preparation and that support. So I think that part is an encouraging factor. And as far as funding in general, you know, that is all going to really depend on the future of I don't know if I really have the best answer. I don't know that I can actually answer you for certain here in this area. Your schools right now, you have several of them looking at what we've learned that maybe has been effective in charters and looking to see if some of the waivers or some of the ideas for innovation could be helpful to them. And so I think that if we can learn some positive things and look at what's needed in our schools, then that's the route we want to focus.
But it's something that we really have to work on, isn't it, and consider about. We've got to think about will funding be lost going to public schools? It's all coming from the same pot of money, isn't it? Charter school funding and public school
depending on the number of students, and if public schools lose students, if traditional public schools lose students, then that does change funding, yes.
The second question that was given to me has been already addressed briefly. What impact will the exit of the Praxis Corps have on the initial licensure requirements?
Okay, so, and I'm glad you asked that because we needed to follow up after the small discussion. So right now, Praxis Corps is a requirement for licensure, okay, in rules and regs. Formerly, it was a requirement in legislation for non-traditional candidates to be licensed. They had to pass a basic skills assessment, and in rules, it was made a requirement for all candidates as a requirement of licensure, okay? Now, preparation programs made it a requirement sometimes for admission into preparation programs. So there's always been a distinction there between it being a licensure requirement or an admission requirement. So the admission requirement was the preparation program decision. The new law does not require a basic skills assessment for licensure. For licensure, the requirements are the preparation pathway, content, and pedagogy. So the requirement is being removed. When rules are redone, the requirement is being removed that there is a basic skill assessment required for licensure. What preparation programs decide to do will be up to preparation programs. So preparation programs will just need to renew programs or update programs with rigorous entry requirements.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
I have a follow-up for that one. I'm sorry. As far as you saying it'll be up to the preparation program, as far as the Praxis Corps being done away with, how will that affect Arkansas when it comes to reciprocity in other schools or the states that require educators to take the Praxis Corps?
So each state has different requirements for licensure. And those that have reciprocity agreements, it will depend on what their agreement is. So in Arkansas, we will accept a standard license from another state. Okay, so in terms of if you have a standard license in Arkansas, then it'll be up to that other state to decide, do you need to meet any additional requirements, just like it is coming to Arkansas. So we accept those standard licenses from another state. When we have candidates meet other requirements, or when they come with maybe a provisional license and they haven't fully met the licensing requirements in that other state.
Hi, my name is Crystal Shelby, and I read an article not too long ago about the current presidential administration that they're planning to propose a bill that would cut funding for teacher prep training programs and I think funding for, I can't remember some of the other areas, but I was just wondering how would that, if something like that happened, how would that affect Arkansas's plans?
Okay, so if you're referring to the initial draft of the president's budget, there were cuts to some programs that would directly impact education. One would be Title IIA funds in that original budget were completely eliminated. Arkansas, 95% of Arkansas's Title IIA money goes directly to school districts. So school districts would be losing out on some revenue. That should be dedicated to improving teacher and leader quality. So that would be a loss there. Now, because schools spend that money in different ways, it's hard to determine the exact impact. At the state level, that money would be gone, and so there would be some training, and within our ESSA plan, we've got some pretty explicit ideas of what we would like to do, help support residencies, help improve some teacher and leader training initiatives, and so yes, it would hurt us if that money did go away. And then some of the other large federal grants could be eliminated as well. So it's all going to depend on exactly where that money is and what it's used for, but any loss would be felt in some different ways here.
Thank you so much.
In response to the information that has just been shared, we have invited Representative Vivian Flowers to respond to what has been heard and give us some information and input on what can happen in the state and in the legislature to help us with our problems.
Hi, everybody. Hello. I am really pleased to be here. As I walked in, somebody said, this is like your second home, and it really is. And I'm glad that we're talking about education. I'm just fresh out of the legislative session just a few weeks ago, and we're going back in for a special session. First of all, Dr. Pfeffer, a lot of the points that you raised were, I think, spot on. And as it relates to our teachers, it's clear that, you know, when you talk about pay, when you talk about curriculum, when you talk about residencies, we can go on and on. There is a lot that needs to be done. And I'm always unnerved when I'm, especially on the floor, listening to some of these bills, and some of them are great ideas, but they miss the mark because we're not addressing the issue. We're not addressing how do we truly invest in education so that we have well-prepared, quality, excited teachers, and then how do we invest in our students in the same way? And I'm one of those folks, I just don't believe we're doing it. Now, I'm not an expert, okay? I didn't come up through a school of education, but I don't think we all have to be educators or rocket scientists or anything to kind of see what's in front of us and know that, particularly as it relates to our state budgets and our federal budget and our policies, that we really are doing a disservice, number one, to our kids, and then number two, to the teachers who are assigned and who dedicate themselves to teach them. And, you know, anything you talk about, and we could talk about engineering, we could talk about politics, we could talk about architects, You pick anything that we rely on to build communities, to build buildings, to grow science or whatever, and that person was taught by a teacher, right? So it really is, it is the foundation of our communities, it's the foundation of our economies. And we pay a lot of lip service to it's all about the kids and it's all about education. And it really is, but now what are we going to do about it? And I think the first problem is a lot of us, including you teachers and on every level, you leave it up to folks. And I don't want to say just folks like me, because I have your back. But also, I'm not the expert. And I remember when I worked for the legislature many, many years ago, when I was a teenager, back in the 90s, a lot of people who were in the legislature, and we have a citizen legislature, a lot of people who were in the legislature were there representing the interests of what they knew best. So you had a lot of farmers. We're in an agricultural state. You had teachers and former educators. You had people who, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Calvin Johnson, former department chair of education, was a legislator. So when he was at the table, as a matter of fact, when we were crafting, a whole new system on how we were going to address lawsuits at the time, right? Supreme Court decisions. It was Dr. Johnson was at the table defining what that policy looked like. So I want to go back because I heard a lot, and I decided instead of getting in the center group, I was going to save my feedback for my feedback. So I couldn't help but think about all of these newfangled ideas that sort of crop up and become the thing that we have to do so we can be successful in education, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I was in school, it was two things. Everybody wanted to go or put their kid in a magnet school, and everybody wanted to go to a performing arts school, right? Those were the things that people were developing that was like, if you go to that, you were going to be successful, you're going to be in the movies, you're going to make a lot of money, you're going to go to Ivy League school. Like, that's what you got to do. And so I started thinking, well, gosh, what's happened over the years? Because for anyone who has sort of looked at some of these period films and looked at where education started, especially in a poor state like Arkansas, education started with a teacher going into a building that people in town built and teaching kids on the off season of farming. Or for us, a lot of us, picking cotton. My mother loves to tell stories about picking cotton. I'm like, I just don't know what you're talking about. But that was real. That was real. And so from there, think about where we are now, where you have to have a college degree, and you have to take a praxis exam, and you have to take entrance exams. We're talking about residencies now, right? It's a very highly professional, highly specialized area that a lot of people don't even realize what teachers do. A lot of people think you go in a classroom, you keep the kids under control, you hand out some papers and you test them, and that's all you do. That's what people think. But that's because y'all aren't at the table in the legislatures and in city councils and in quorum. I'm always talking about the politics because it's real. So think about this. We used to have sort of one-town school houses, right? Where you had a teacher, or if it was a wealthy town, you might have had a few teachers and a few schoolhouses and a schoolmaster. That's what it used to be. And even though then they didn't make much money, they were like the pillars of the community. So since then, think about all these different kind of schools we have. Of course, we have traditional public schools that's required to teach children. Children cannot not go to school. You have to go to school. You have homeschooling. Dr. Blakely talked about charter schools. We have private schools. We have magnet schools. We have STEM academies. We have boarding schools, parochial schools, pre-K academies, Montessori schools, military academies, performing arts, alternative schools. And even with that, you've got the rural schools, you have facilities, you have all of these things, special education, alternative education. It's very, very complex, but at the end of the day, what we're supposed to be doing is teaching kids, K through 12. Then we have pre-K, then we have college, then we have 2 years, right? And all of these things are supposed to really just prepare kids to be able to be self-sustaining adults and raise their families and live someplace and be able to work in a career or work in a job. And we know that we're not really doing a great job. We do a whole lot better job than people realize. But in terms of the kind of money that we spend now, out of our checks, anybody ever look at their check and see how much money is going to the federal and the state and local government? Anybody ever look at your receipt every time you buy something and see that 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9%, sometimes 10%? That's going somewhere. And a great proportion of the money from the state goes to education. So think about this. Every time we talk about education reform, every time we talk about education policy, it always goes back to teachers. As if the success of our students it all rests on teachers. Now, it's a huge part of it. Everybody remembers their favorite teacher. Everybody remembers the teacher that turned on the light bulb for them, or mini light bulbs. I do. I had a lot of good ones. But it's not, so when we think about the system is not just teachers. The system is not just tax dollars. The system is not just facilities. It's not just policy and academic distress and fiscal distress. Think about these things that really define and make the difference for education, right? And for the teacher and the kids who get in that classroom. So before we even get to the kids in the classroom, you got the kids at home. The kids at home with their parents and whatever may be going on. At the table we talked about kids who might be in 3 or 4 different school districts in 1 or 2 years, right? Those are issues that we keep expecting teachers to deal with when we've been preparing them to prepare lesson plans and teach them academics. But now teachers are social workers too. And they have to be, because we've got so many societal problems that we're not dealing with as a part of how we deal with education reform. So when you look at a place like Mariana, or even a place like Pine Bluff, but let's look at a place like Mariana. Very, very few jobs. So when you have very few jobs, and you don't have a whole lot of rooftops is what they call them, so then you don't have a whole lot in property taxes. That's where a lot of our money comes for schools, right? Besides federal funding. So if you've got an area like that without a whole lot in funds, and then you're playing catch up, because everybody left. So we know a little bit about that here in Pine Bluff. A lot of folks leaving. So now your tax base is messed up, and then you're expecting these kids to compete with Bentonville kids and Little Rock kids by the time they finish high school and it's time for them to go to college. So the main thing is I want you to think about is, in addressing the full system, we have to address the system, the part of the system that's outside of the realm of schools and education. And that requires everyone in here to be a part of the political process, the governing process, and the policy process. And a lot of that feels new, and I might be standing up here today and sit down and maybe nobody will think about my solution to our problems. But I'm telling you that, for example, you had proposals on the floor this year heavily backed by folks outside of education, suggesting that we take our public dollars that come out of your checks that's supposed to be funding education for most students, and for a good proportion of that money to be available to fund private schools, for kids to go to private schools. And we know that a lot of those opportunities aren't even available to kids in rural areas. And they certainly aren't available to anyone who wants it, so is that really school choice? There's not a whole lot of school choice in Arkansas compared to a Connecticut or a Maryland. It just isn't, because we're a small state. We have fewer people in our whole state than a lot of cities do. So it's different for us, and we have to treat it as such. I want to encourage you all to do a couple of things. So even though the legislative session is over, and the interim, we have interim meetings. That's not really sexy, and you're not going to see a lot of back and forth in the news. You probably won't hear anything about it. But you can be involved. I want to encourage you all to be involved, not just on the county level and on the city level, or especially on your school board level, and all those areas are important. I want to encourage you to get involved in terms of the legislation, because that is where the money comes from. That's where a great deal of the money comes from for our city, the schools in our state. That's where the policy comes from. We talked about charter schools. Same thing. If everybody, one more story, I promise, and then I'm gonna end this. If we make everything about place and changing these structures, and we've heard all the different kinds of schools there are, we can change, if we all went to charter schools in the next 5 years, we'd have the same students, the same issues, the same economy, the same teachers, and we would just have charter schools, maybe with some different rules. So I want you all to write this number down and write down a web address. So there is an agency called the Bureau of Legislative Research, and they are responsible for staffing our committee meetings, including our education meetings. The phone number is 501-682-1937. And just call them before the end of the week. Ask to speak with Mark Hudson. He's the staff person for education. And tell him or his secretary that you would like to be added to the listserv. So whenever there is an education meeting, they will notify you of it, they will send you minutes, they will send you an agenda. At the very least, you can keep up with it that way, but if you see something that's important on there, early childhood education, teacher salaries, teacher residencies, whatever, you might say, I think I'll go up there today and see what's going on, right? But just get on the list, so maybe you could be at the table. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is there's the legislative website is www.arcleg.state.ar.us. And go to that website and save it. And every now and then, go to the, there's a menu where you can go to any committee. Look up the education committee. See who's on it. See when they meet. You can go back to look at past agendas, past minutes, and during the session, you can see what's going on. You can see who's filing bills, but it's a very, very user-friendly website. And I want to encourage you to go to it, become familiar with it, and use it, and then feel free to call me anytime. My email address is vivian.flowers@arkansashouse.org. And I can stand up here and talk all day about policies and about what's already happened, but what really happens moving forward is going to depend on not just your legislators, not just your administrators, and your directors on every level, it's really going to depend on you. What the innovations are, what the policy looks like, who the leaders are, and how we spend our money is going to depend on you. So I'm open for any questions, and I really thank you for your attention.
At this time, we're going to ask if Dr. Pfeffer, Joan Leno, and Vivian Flowers will return, please. We would like to take this opportunity to thank you for what you have shared with us today and for you to keep this in memory of where you've been, a small memento from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Enjoy.